We didn't invent great sound. We perfected it.
We are controlling transmission.
WLTK DB. Let's talk. Alternative Talk Radio. WLTKDB.com.
Strickland. I have been fascinated with the unknown and paranormal realms since childhood. After a profound experience with my grandmother's spirit 20 years ago, I have been on a quest to observe, study, investigate, and communicate with the afterlife and beyond. It's been an ongoing journey of exploration and discovery. One that has taught me how mortality and the spirit world are forever bonded through the veils of time.
And welcome to another episode of the Afterlife Chronicles and Beyond that was recently selected by FeedSpot as one of the top 25 programs on the Afterlife. I am your host, Nicole Strickland, on the WLTKDB network. That's WLTKDB.com or the letstalk.com. You can sign in there right on the main website, get in the chat room there through Facebook, do whatever you need to do. It's also streaming live on Facebook on the Afterlife Chronicles Facebook page at Afterlife Chronicles and Beyond. Hope you're doing well tonight. You know, we've been MIA the last few weeks. Life gets in the way sometimes, but we're back. So happy to be back. And I'm really excited for tonight's guest, Rocky Smith, lifelong resident of Oregon City, local historian, paranormal investigator. He also founded the fabulous Northwest Ghost Tours and Haunted Oregon City and is the director of the very quick growing Oregon Ghost Conference. Rocky, thank you so much for joining me tonight. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm excited to talk to you. And we talked actually more in the last, 10 minutes than we have probably in a couple of years. So
I know. Yeah, the last time I think we saw each other was the Preston Castle Paracon a couple years ago, I think it was. I know.
Oh my.
Yeah.
That was, I had a huge experience there. Massive experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we can get into that for sure. I mean, we can get into it right now if you want. But that place, it's funny. When I first went there, I remember I had this visceral reaction where I hadn't even stepped on the premises yet, right. But I went up to the gate and this was my first time there, and I just started crying. And that's so unusual for me. So.
Well, I just remember that was my first time there, and just driving up the driveway and trees, and it was wow. I mean, you're just going into a different place and a different time, and then once you get into the building, it's overwhelming. In fact, I had an opportunity, I think, to go back the second night for the late night investigation, and I didn't, because it wasn't that I didn't want to go. I was so exhausted and drained from it. And I really would love to go back to that building, but it was a lot.
There's a lot of energy in there. And I remember, if I remember correctly, the first night I was in your group and you were having a very profound experience. And it really, there's just a mix of emotions there. And it's for someone who's sensitive, even if for someone who isn't that sensitive, it'll hit you for sure.
We were in kind of the hospital ward, or the what, I don't know what the room's called, but
it was insane.
Yeah.
But anyways, I mean, there's so much. I mean, oh my goodness, we only have an hour, and there's so much we can get into. But one reason I admire you, I mean, you do so much. You wear so many different hats, and you do it so well. But one reason I admire you is your love of history, and you really bring that to life with these places. So when did you discover your love of history? Was it always like with you ever since like you were a child, or?
Well, and I guess my start of it was so focused on local history is really, and so I live in Oregon City, which a lot of people know. Oregon City is the end of the Oregon Trail. It was the capital of the Oregon Territory. So I grew up in Oregon City, and, kind of like when you do in a small town or any town, you think, well, why does anyone want to live here? And, maybe someday I'll get out of this town kind of thing. And in high school, I got a job working for the Chamber of Commerce. And I actually realized that the city was coming on this big celebration. Upon this big celebration, it was going to be celebrating the 150th year of the Oregon Trail. And the city wasn't prepared for these tourists to come. I mean, the city wasn't prepared to be a tourist destination, really. At that time, the museum that was being built wasn't open yet. And as an artist and as a graphic design student in high school, and one that really didn't have a job, I started creating T-shirts and tourism souvenirs, basically, for people coming into town. And I really started learning about the history of my city. And once I discovered the incredible city that this place had, I couldn't stop. And I started working in museums. I started working in historic places throughout the city and researching things in college. And it turned out that most every place that I worked was haunted. So it was the history interest of the local history that got me interested in the paranormal, because people would come into these places and want to know the stories. And to me, the ghost stories were interesting, but it wasn't that interesting until I could really connect it with the history. And for me, it was like, having an experience or telling a story. We all hear these ghost stories like, oh, I saw a shadow. Well, okay. But if we can tell who that shadow is, and that person has been seen and described by people in different time periods, and it's the same person that lived there 150 years ago, and you can start connecting the dots to maybe this is a real person or was a real person, that's really hard not to be interested in it and try to figure out what's causing that. And for me, I was really, my tours are so history based because, it's one thing to tell a ghost story, but if someone can really grasp the fact that you're standing in a place where these people maybe are still there in some way and still connected with the town, and it's a way to, really have people connect in history with history in a way that, sometimes, as a teacher, sometimes, there's a certain way of teaching things and whether students find it boring or whether your audience finds it boring. And so if you can realize that, okay, if I tell the story this way, it's boring. If I tell the story this way, it really grasps people. And so, I'll tell the same stories on my tours 50, 60 times, but every time someone's on my tour, it's a different story or it's a different perception of it or a different take on it. And I think that's what draws people to it. And it's one of those things where I just can't stop. Like, I just want to learn more and I just want to keep doing it. And it never gets old.
Right. It's a passion, and I think studying, and being able to connect the dots. I've always say that history and the paranormal are like best friends with a dear kinship. You really can't have one without the other. And it makes both fields so much more compelling because they both feed off of each other. And I've actually been on one of your tours in Oregon City. Yes. I mean, I visited Oregon City. The very first time I went to the conference, fell in love. It's such a great city, and you're a very compelling tour guide in the way that you relay the stories. You make them come to life. You give them value, and so people like that.
Well, so we've all been on tours before. I've been on tours a lot, and you can tell the difference between someone who is doing a tour that's reading a script, and someone who really really cares about the place or really is connected to the place. And you know this from your work at the Queen Mary, and that's another thing that we kind of hit off right off the bat.
I know.
Right? And when we started talking about that and going off to other things, I think you can just see who was really excited about those kind of experiences and really is invested in the time that it takes to research this stuff, because it's kind of like going on a paranormal investigation. This research, the history research is just as much work as paranormal investigation, and it's not that exciting, but you could work 10 hours and find one story and you're like, it's totally worth it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just amazing,
Right. So, I mean, and being able to like connect, because, we've done a lot of history, or we do tours at the Adobe here in Rancho Buena Vista Adobe, right. I've talked about. And we've actually been able to somewhat verify through some paranormal evidence and personal experiences aspects that actually correlate to historical records. And when that happens, it's just, right. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing.
Well, and it's getting...
And so, I mean, you've done a lot of work at the Ermatinger House.
Right, a ton, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I mean, it's getting easier, too, to do that research, because when, remember we used to go to I assume you remember, go to the library, and look for newspaper articles and searching for things. I mean, no wonder people didn't find this stuff. I mean, it was horrible. And so many of our local historic newspapers are being digitized. And we're finding newspaper articles in history of stories that no one's talked about in 100 years because it just wasn't easily accessible. And I think that's really what I've been finding really interesting lately. I'm just archiving all these newspaper articles to add to my tours. I've got hundreds of stories that I haven't even told people.
Oh my goodness.
Just incredible, So
wow.
That's I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's definitely a passion, you can tell. And so speaking of your tours, how many do you offer in Oregon City now?
Now is a relative.
Well, I mean, like, let's say prior to the pandemic and post-pandemic. Yeah.
So I started in Oregon City with one 2-hour tour years ago. And by the end of a year or two, that 2-hour tour was like a 3-hour tour. And then I was like, you know what? People aren't going to walk around in Oregon City for 4 hours with me. So then I had to break it into 2 tours. So now I have 4 different 2-hour tours of Oregon City. And it's not a very huge city, but we have several neighborhoods. So I do 4 different 2-hour tours. And I still don't feel like I can tell all the stories in those tours.
Right.
I'm hoping to start tours back up this spring. So, hopefully in a couple months. I'm doing tours for the first time in a while, over the seaside weekend. We'll kind of require everyone to wear masks and stay apart, and it'll all be outside. But, so I am going to hopefully start doing tours end of spring into summer in Oregon City again.
That's good. Things getting back to normal. I know we haven't been able to do tours for like a year or so, I think since last March. One thing I want to talk to you about, because it's a huge part of your history, is the
Ermatinger
House.
Yes.
And like your connection with that. And you've had like so many different experiences there. That's like that's almost to San Diego, like the Hotel Del is, or the Whaley House is to San Diego. I would say that is to Oregon City in many respects.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon City has, several historic homes that are also haunted and have a fair share of history. I think most of the people in Oregon City think of the McLaughlin House first. But the Ermatinger House was actually built before the McLaughlin House and has a unique history in itself. It was built by the Hudson Bay Company, and Francis Ermatinger worked for the Hudson Bay Company and McLaughlin, and kind of ran the Hudson Bay Company store here. But I started working in the house for the city of Oregon City back in high school. And this was at the time that I really started getting into history, and people were coming into the city, 1994, 95. And the city was neglecting the house badly. And I was so irritated by it. And I, as a high school college student, didn't have a whole lot of sway in terms of getting the city to step up and take care of the house. And so I kind of fought that battle for quite a long time. And I got very involved in the city in other different ways and had other concerns. And actually, it's one of the reasons that led me to run for city commission in Oregon City was because of the issues with the house, but also because of other things that I was really concerned about at the city level. And so once I got elected to the city commission, we kind of made the house. The house is owned by the city, and so the city kind of expects owners of historic buildings to keep up their buildings. And we owned the oldest house essentially in the city, and we're neglecting it. And it dumbfounded me that the city was operating at a different standard than they expected other people in the city to follow. And so it was a long process, and it ended up through grants and funding through the city and county and various other areas, over $600,000, more than that, to save the house. But it was a 20-year period that took me really to save that house. It's saved. It's beautiful. It's restored. It's open to the public. It's an important place, and it's kind of like what we talked about with Preston Castle. People kind of say, well, Rocky really cares about the Ermatinger House. Okay, yeah, and it's kind of like that. It's kind of like someone saying, well, Nicole kind of cares about the Queen Mary, Right, yeah. They don't get it. I mean, people don't get the connection. And it really came down to not just saving a historic building, but it came down to, if that historic building is gone, your story is gone. And
right,
if your story
absolutely
is gone, then the entire story of this place is gone. And I cannot let that happen. I made a promise to the spirits in that house that I would tell their story and that I would take care of that house as best I can. And I will do it until I die. Because it takes a lot of work to save historic places, and there's going to have to be someone 30 years from now that does it again. And that's just an ongoing thing. And people don't realize how important it is. They think, well, it's just a building. We can rebuild it. We can do it.
They just don't understand. They're not on that same thought level. They don't get it from an emotional, perspective.
So once you can get people into the building and you can tell what this building means to you, people get it. People do get it at some point. And they, sometimes it takes them having their own experience with it before they really understand it.
And that's actually a way to maybe, I guess, sway people that don't automatically have that connection. You can then link it by, having, once they have their own experience, then they kind of understand more of like where you're coming from.
And it's some about the experience. But before the pandemic, I was doing a weekly series at the White Eagle, which is one of the most haunted places in Portland, the White Eagle Saloon.
I heard about that. Yep.
It was such a fun experience. And I would do a talk, Spirits of Stumptown kind of series. And then I would take people through the White Eagle Saloon as a tour. But, you walk through these buildings and you see the photographs on the wall from when the building was built, in the 1900s, mid 1900s. And you look and you say, okay, well, that display case, that's the same display case that's in this photograph.
Right.
The tile floor that's there, it's the same. And when people can really clue into that and realize, it really takes you back. It really takes you back in time. And I think that was one of my first really things that hit me when I went to the Queen Mary the first time. I walked in, it was just silent. There was not really anyone around, and you just felt like I'm in a different time. And there was music playing, from the time, and it was just like you were in a movie. and I honestly walked around because I don't know why it was not so busy at the time that I was there. I walked around the whole ship. There was hardly anyone around. No one really said anything. And there was a door open to the ballroom. And I kind of peered into the doorway. And, this is right out of a movie, right? I look into the doorway of the big ballroom there, and there's a guy like buffing the floor. It's like 11 o'clock at night, He's buffing the floor, and he's like, oh, come on in. I walk around, look around. I mean, I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah,
exactly. But it was such a connection to the place, and it was just like, we want to share this place too. We want to, we love the history and want to share it. So
absolutely. And hold that thought, because we have to take a 2-minute break, and we'll come back in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Afterlife Chronicles and Beyond with my guest tonight, Rocky Smith, director of the Oregon Ghost Conference, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned, guys.
Others say it. We prove it.
We are controlling transmission.
WLTK DB. Let's talk. Alternative Talk Radio. WLTKDB.com.
Mackie Reiki is a full-service Reiki therapy center offering both in-person and distance Reiki sessions. Reiki is a gentle healing energy that can assist in clearing, repairing, and maintaining energy that is vital for optimal health. Reiki can also assist with anxiety, depression, and even addiction. You can schedule a Reiki session by visiting our website, www.mackiereiki.com. That's www.mackeyreiki.com.
Patreon is a place for creators. We're one of them. Visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/WLTKDB. Check out all the unique support tiers we offer. You can get early release episodes, station mugs and t-shirts, free station service work, and much more. Help the station reach its $1,000 per month goal to make our station totally ad-free. Patreon.com/WLTKDB. We appreciate your support.
21 minutes past the hour. You are tuning into the Afterlife Chronicles and Beyond. I am your host, Nicole Strickland. If you're now joining us, you can tune in right there at www.WLTKDB.com or the letstalk.com. You can join the chat room right there on the main page. And so tonight's guest is none other than Rocky Smith, director of the Oregon Ghost Conference, local Oregon City historian, paranormal investigator extraordinaire, founder of Northwest Ghost Tours and Haunted Oregon City. And I'm so excited to be talking with him. It's funny because I haven't seen him in 2 years since we were last at the Preston Castle. And like you said, we've been talking more in the last 20 minutes than we probably have in 2 years. But thank you so much for joining me tonight. Before the break, you were mentioning one of my favorite places, the Queen Mary, of course. I mean, hello, like pretty much everyone knows my love for the ship. And it's so, when you said that you were there at 11 p.m. and you were looking, I presume it was probably the Queen's Salon maybe, or the Royal Salon, and someone was buffering the floor with modern equipment. It's like, it's so crazy.
And the thing that weirded me out, Nicole, about the whole thing, it seemed like everyone, and this was years ago, but my first time there, it seemed like everyone was a movie character.
Right.
It seemed like they were all playing parts. And then I thought, well, wow, when I go on the ghost tour, I can't wait to see the character that leads the ghost tour. And it was the most normal person. You're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense.
Totally. It's so funny.
It's such a great, I really want to go back. I'll go back.
Oh, yeah.
I was down in California a couple of years ago, and we did the, Winchester House and all that again. I think actually when we were at Preston Castle, we drove over there and did that too during that time.
Right. I wanted to meet up with you guys then, but I was still like about 5 hours out. So, but yeah, that's a fabulous house. Todd Bates and I were just on his show, Haunted Voices. We interviewed a guest that she really connected connected to the Winchester House. She actually lived there when she was a child, and her family were the caretakers there. So that was a really cool, very, very cool conversation. But, it's like when you see, like you were referencing, like the example of the photo on the wall, it's like when you see historical photos and then you might see an artifact that's like right there in the present that was actually in one of the photographs. I mean, how can you not get passionate about that? I mean, it's like, it's like, how can you not? It's crazy, but some people just don't have, I see it too on the Queen Mary. Like I'll walk around and I can always tell, all right, that person gets it. That person's interested in the history. That person's clueless, throwing cigarette butts out on the deck and whatnot. But anyways, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, history does have a definite connection to paranormal events and the other way around. I mean, you're so adept at doing a lot of this historical research. How would you recommend someone who's maybe new to historical research and or new to paranormal research, how would you recommend them to go about historically researching a place? And I know that there's, some differences between like maybe a business or a private home versus like an actual historical site.
Yeah, I think people tend to complicate it more than it is. I mean,
true.
So I think it depends on what you're looking for.
Right.
If it's a specific house, you go to the city or the county or whatever, and most cities or counties will have a register of historic places. Obviously you won't be able to do that for new buildings, but there's several layers to it. If it's a building that's old, that that it was built 100 years ago, there's a chance there's some sort of registry that documents some of those buildings. And so you can go to the county and you can look that up. And sometimes it'll be, usually, or the city itself, there'll be an inventory form that will say, okay, here's this house, and it will give a little history. And most of that can be done online now. The problem is what happens when you're investigating a place where a house used to be, or keep in mind the house that you're investigating and researching may have been moved. For instance,
right, exactly.
The Ermatinger House. So you can't always assume that, this house was built here. It gets a little more complicated. And so then you have to start looking at, if this house moved, what's there now? And then you can start going into like the Sanborn maps, which are the old fire insurance maps that cities would have that would show footprints of where buildings were. And you can kind of say, okay, well, this building shape was the same. And you could kind of say, well, then 10 years later, there was an addition. Or you can say, well, it's a totally different building. So those are little things that can start helping you, because you can't even rely on addresses really, because for instance, like the White Eagle that we were talking about, it was built as a one-story building, and then they added the second story later, and so there's an address that is like a half address for the upstairs and different things like that. And you also have to kind of look at old maps because the street names can change.
Exactly.
In Portland, a lot of the street names, you'll get some solid streets that are the same, but some streets change. So it's kind of, once you do it, you kind of know the things to look for, and it gets a little easier. Once you get a name of someone that lived there, then you can start doing newspaper archives, and you can start going into obituaries and everything. And there's a lot of things that people don't think about. One of the great resources that people don't think about is just basic high school yearbooks.
That's so true. Yes.
Back to a yearbook, or you go to, like, if I go up to Oregon City High School, they have every yearbook going back to 1920s. So you have every single person that's ever gone through that school where you can find their name. But it also, in the yearbooks, has photographs of the town from those time periods that people wouldn't normally look for. So little things like that over time that you start picking up on, and it's not any one place that you're going to find the information. It's going to be compounded, and it's going to be, I find this little bit, and that leads me to this, and that leads me to this. And so actually, I'm going to teach a class at the Ghost Conference just about that, and try to walk through some of those processes and how people can go about researching a haunted place or just a regular historic place that they want to know more information about.
Yeah, I definitely want to take that class. I just saw it posted the other night. And, sometimes there's obviously archivists that can help, but it's like you said, once you find a little piece of nugget, that can lead you, down the road, and then you can find, it's just kind of like being able to navigate everything.
Sometimes it'll lead you to a whole bunch of stuff that you weren't looking for, but you still find cool anyway. And it takes you to a whole different place, but it's worth it.
One thing before the break, I wanted to ask, with all your work at the Ermatinger House and of course other places as well, but specifically the Ermatinger House, have you found that the general spiritual energy has changed since your devotion to helping that home? Because I would imagine it would. And how would you describe that as opposed to how it was before? If that makes,
Yeah, it's going to be an emotional answer for me. I'll tell you.
Only whatever you want to, I don't want to cause you stress or anything, but whatever you feel free to answer.
It hits me hard because it was such a long process in fixing that house. And honestly, I made a promise to the spirits and I said, I will get this house. I promised that. And so I had no choice. I kept after it until it was done. And what was really interesting, because of the entire time that it took, it didn't take 20 years to restore the house. It took 20 years to start the process. It took about 10 years really that the house was closed to fix it. And so in that 10-year period, I wasn't able to go in the house. And in one of the times during the construction, I was allowed to go in the house, and there was so much going on. And that was one of the first questions that, William or other friends of mine asked me is, what do you think? Does it still feel the same? Are they still there? And I said, I can't tell because there was so much chaos going on. And the last thing I was focused on was that, because the house, I was looking at the plans and figuring that out. So as the house started to get closer to its grand opening, I took a journey into the house, and I walked around the house with some city staff people, and I made a comment that was something along the lines of, I don't feel that they're here right now, or something like that. It was a general comment that ended up being put in the newspaper, basically saying, well, Rocky thinks it's not haunted anymore. Well,
oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
And I was like, well, okay, that's not exactly what I meant.
Right. Exactly.
You would go into the house and you would feel a presence occasionally. And sometimes that was a good thing and sometimes it was a bad thing. But the house was very active when the spirits weren't happy and the house was not being taken care of. So now if you look at the house is redone and taken care of, and I fulfilled my promise to them, there shouldn't be a whole lot of angst. And so when I went into the house, it was peaceful and I didn't feel like there was anything, kind of out of place. And I didn't feel a lot. Well, the first time we did a tour in the house, this was actually very emotional because it was me and William. We went into the house, William Becker, friend of mine in Oregon City.
Yes.
Went into the house and we were doing a tour with this first group that had gone through kind of the first time we'd done sort of a ghost tour of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And we're downstairs in the dining room and we heard footsteps upstairs. And no one had gone upstairs yet. And I said, they're still here. And William said, okay, do you want to go up there? And so I went upstairs, and it was kind of like at the Preston Castle where I ran into that little boy at Preston Castle where I said, okay, I have to go up there and talk to her in the Ermatinger House. It's a little girl, and kind of, take my own time before the group goes up there. And I really get emotional about it because they're there. And they know that we're there. They know that they know I've done my job. They know that I fulfilled my promise. And so I that doesn't mean things are going to fly around the house. It doesn't mean that doors are going to slam. It means that the house is the way it should be right now. And they're there. It doesn't have to be a scary thing or things moving around for people to say, well, they're still there. They're still there. You can feel it. To me, the fact that they're enjoying the place that the house is at now makes me feel like it was all worth it.
Absolutely. And, this whole example goes to show this is in my opinion, the core of paranormal research here. This is the core, being able to connect with those that walk the land before us, being able to connect with spiritual energies and have that rapport. That's what it's about. It's not just about, going in and capturing an EVP or getting a fantastic photo. That's significant, but yet it's insignificant. What's important is that rapport. And hearing you relay this experience, it literally warms my heart so much, because we need more of this,
and not to simplify it, but at the time, I was hired to do two things. I was hired to tell people the story of the house and about these people that lived there. Right. And I was supposed to take care of the house. And, from the first day I said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to fulfill that promise. And because honestly, the house was most active and things were the most scary really in the house when people were not taking care of it. And if this was your house and people were neglecting it, well, yeah, you would be irritated by it.
Exactly.
So, I made that promise the first day kind of as a self-protection, because I didn't know what I was walking into, but I basically said, hey, be nice to me. I promise I'll, be nice to this place. I'll save this place. I'll work on it. I'll tell your story. And, 20 years later, I'm still doing it because I felt like I have to do this.
Right. I would rather have a place be not as active and be completely at peace with the way things are than the other way around. Because the other way around, if you look at it, then that's, in a way, it's exploitation. We're going in there and we're wanting to have these experiences at the expense of these spirits, and that's not okay in my book. And that's, this is a whole I don't mean for this to go down in another direction, but it's one of those thorns in my side all the time that, people do that in this field, and it's, energies aren't here for our amusement, and so when I hear you talk about your devotion to this historical house and hearing how the spiritual energy is thanking you and appreciative and how it's more at peace, that I can't tell you, like, the warmth I feel right now. It's so important. So,
well, and I think, part of it, people ask me, what is a ghost? What do you think a ghost is? I don't know.
Right.
That's not my job.
Right.
Right. A lot of paranormal investigators, and we all have our different niches and things that we're focused on. I like going on investigations. I'm interested in it. That's not what I want to do as a job. That's not something that I find. I find it fun and interesting. But to me, it's like, it's not my job to determine what it is or who it is. It is into some history, but I'm not trying to ghost hunt or bust or try to even define it. I'm just trying to say, here's my experiences. Here's your experiences. Here's the history I know. Connect it all together, and you leave this tour at the end of the night, and you decide what you think it is, because I will present a pretty good case that something is happening here. And these stories are important, but it's up to us to really take our own perceptions and try to translate that. And so to me, that's the simple way of, I'm telling the stories of these people from the past in the most respectful possible way I can. And if I'm in a place with a tour group, and I think this probably happened on the night that you're on our tour, if we go into a place and something starts happening, I'm opening the group to that, and I'm opening myself. I have a connection with these places. If I feel things are starting to go south, I say, well, we're going to leave now. Because this is their place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a reputation and a trust with the spirits in these places that if they don't want me there, I won't be there. And that's why typically sometimes in the Ermatinger House, or even in the places that I go on tours, I'll go off by myself before I'll take a group there to have a conversation with the space and with who's there to say, this is what we're doing. This is how I'm going to do it. If at all during this time there's a problem, this is your space. And if we expect them to do that for us when we go home, like we like to say, well, okay, we've had our fun here and now we want to go home and sleep, but don't follow us home, ghosts. We can't expect them to follow that if we don't, if we don't respect their space. So this idea of going in and just stirring stuff up for the fun of it and saying, well, that's so disrespectful. It's disrespectful to the history of the place. It's disrespectful to the spirits that lived there in the past. I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, I don't either. And we do the same thing too. I mean, going in and having that initial conversation to kind of set the tone and let them know like what our intent is. And so, I mean, everything you're saying is so, it hits the mark on so many levels. And it's, when I first started investigating, I was really excited about the whole investigation process. And yes, I do still conduct them.
Sure.
But I've moved on beyond that. And it's almost like I'm almost ambivalent now whether I want to conduct an investigation per se, because of the same reasons. Right. It's more of what's more important to me is the connection. What's beyond that, the connection. So this is hitting the mark on so many levels.
A lot of times, we use the word investigation. It's like, that means we're going to lug all this equipment and flashing lights and all this stuff. Do I have some equipment that I'll take with me? Yeah. But I'm better off just walking around the place with nothing.
Absolutely. Totally.
And you've seen this, when you walk into a place, I mean, it just hits you. You don't need the paranormal equipment for that if you're really tapped into the place that you're at. And if you have built a relationship and a respect for the place, it's going to happen because they're going to feel comfortable with you. And like in Preston Castle, that little boy was standing next to me, and I was reluctant to say anything about the little boy standing next to me, because as soon as I did, everyone came, with their equipment, and I'm like, get away from me right now.
Yes, exactly. Okay? Yeah, exactly.
And I remember I left the room because I didn't want that little spirit of that little boy to be stuck with all these, lights and equipment, and he was comfortable being with me. And so we walked out of that room. We walked up the stairs, and I don't know if you remember this, but I walked up the stairs, and William was sitting on the bench up on the next level of Preston Castle. He didn't know that the experience that we were having and I was having, and I walked up the stairs, and as soon as I got to the top of the stairs, he said, "Who's the little boy with you?" I
so remember that.
And I
remember. Okay, yes.
Okay, so I guess he is with me. I guess I'm aware that he's there, and that someone else knows he is too. And that's happened to me a lot because I don't see that. I feel it. Mm-hmm. For example, in the Queen Mary, I was in the changing room behind the pool.
Yes.
In the little stalls.
Yes.
And I was by myself. And I was in one of the stalls in the changing room. There was a couple across the way from me in another stall. And you know where I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's the women's changing room. Yeah.
And it's super dark in there. And I felt someone next to me. And I felt like it was a little girl. And that was my first time there. We walked out of the pool into the pool area. And these two people standing across from me, they said, I don't think they even knew my name at the time. But they said, there was a little girl standing by you. Did you know that? And I said, well, yeah, I did. I mean, I didn't see her, and then I think we found out that that's Jackie. Is that her name?
Yeah, there's several, but that to me, based on your describing that would probably be Jackie.
Okay.
And she tends to gravitate to people right away that she's comfortable with.
Right.
So that makes complete sense. Yep. So, I mean, this is such a fantastic discussion. I want it because we only have about 15 minutes left. I know, right? It flies by. I should probably have a 2-hour show. Hello. Anyways, but we can always have you back on in the future. But kind because there's so much to talk about, but I want to get into the Oregon Ghost Conference, especially this year, because it's a little bit different in that it's longer, because typically it's over the weekend. I'll let you to talk about that and like how you, I mean, a lot of people that are listening already know, you and your background, but in case there's people that don't, a little bit about the Oregon Ghost Conference and how you started to get involved with that. I mean, you founded it, so it's your whole vision.
Yeah. So. Well, actually, William Becker and me started it. It was an idea that we had.
That's right.
We talked about. There was some other smaller paranormal events that happened in the Portland area that were kind of year after year and hit and miss. And what I found kind of off-putting by some of these paranormal events that I was going to, and this is 10 years ago, it was the same core group of people.
Yeah.
And that's not bad, but I was saying, okay, if you have a convention or a get-together of the same paranormal people, and it doesn't grow and it doesn't invite the general public to it, then how does that build a community? Right.
Right.
So they were very small events, and I was going mainly to kind of promote the tours and things I was doing. And if you buy a booth space at an event, you go there and you don't have a public audience, then there's not really a reason to continue that. And so, the events were very small and I really enjoyed them. But at a certain point I said, these events should be bringing in the public, because to me, there's people, as you know, that are so into the paranormal that want to do the investigations, that want to do the tours. There's some people that just don't know anything about it and maybe just want to get a reading,
right.
A psychic reading, or just want to maybe question or just come and listen to something. And so to me, those events had ended, and I said, well, if we should start, William and me talked about it, and eventually we said, well, let's do it. And of course, we started it in Oregon City because it was a way to bring people into Oregon City and talk about the history that I had worked with the house, Ermatinger House. But honestly, after the 3 or 4 years in Oregon City, it got too big. And the fourth year, we had to move it into the old high school in Oregon City, which is one of the bigger buildings in the city, a vacated high school that is also haunted. And it was great in terms of a cool haunted place. But, when you're doing an event, you have to rent chairs and tables and furniture, and you have to think about internet and Wi-Fi, and that's not something that's doable in a abandoned high school. And so it cost a huge amount of money. And I was scared because I was like, I don't know what we're going to do, because I do not want this event to die. And I want it to continue and grow, because it was getting very successful. And honestly, that same week of the Ghost Conference at the high school, where I was thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do next year, I got a phone call from Gretchen in Seaside. And she just retired this year. Amazing lady, works for the city of Seaside in the convention center, just retired. She called, she found our event online, and she said to me, you need to bring your event to Seaside. I had never thought about bringing it to Seaside. I said, how about this? I'll come out to Seaside and you show me what you have to offer. You take me around, you tell me what you think. And I did. And we've been in Seaside ever since. And unfortunately, we were outgrowing the Seaside Convention Center, and then they said, well, that's okay, we're doing an expansion. And we thought, well, great, the expansion's going to be done and we're going to get to have this great event. And then, we had the pandemic, and so started, and we had to cancel the 2020 event. We never dreamed. I mean, we canceled the 2020 event, 2 weeks before the event, because the governor, shut everything down. We never thought we would be canceling a second ghost conference ever. We never.
I know, right? I mean, it's unbelievable.
It was not something we had even imagined, and so we're doing it mostly online. I'm going to be in Seaside myself. I'm going to be doing ghost tours on the 25th, 26th, 27th in Seaside, Oregon. So I'll be doing ghost tours nightly on that weekend. Jeff Davis is going to do a tour in Astoria on Sunday, the 28th. But everything else is going to be pretty much online. I think some people will be in Seaside just to go to Seaside and be there for spring break. And so we'll have, definitely be hanging out at the Bridge Tender a little bit and going to some places. But most everything will be online. And my hope is that at least keeps the interest in our event up enough that we can go back next year and really have, I hope next year we can.
Oh, I know, right? I mean, I imagine it will. I imagine it will. I mean, I think 2015 was when I first went to the Oregon, and that was the last, I think, year that was at the old high school. So right. I've been able to go to Seaside 3 times now. Seaside's fantastic. It really is the perfect venue for it. And, I'm just so excited. I know things are virtual, but that's okay. I mean, the conference is so well done. And like you said, it just attracts so many different people that are kind of on different levels and have different interests. And that's what makes it such a great conference. So.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a huge compliment.
Well, yeah.
I will I've been watching some of your past interviews because and I think one of the best compliments, I think I watched Pete and you've interviewed, several other interviews. And almost every interview, you start off by introducing the guest and saying, I met them at the Oregon Ghost Conference.
Right? I know. It's like, I know there's...
I mean, that can't be a bigger compliment than that. And
yeah,
when you plan an event, you don't realize the effect that it has on people.
Right.
To some degree, but when things like that happen and you realize, okay, these partnerships or friendships that are grown and the community that has been built on the West Coast in the paranormal is mostly because of this event. And that was not something that I ever really thought would happen to the level that it did. And I think I'm shocked by that every time someone says something to me that, and it happens quite a bit where someone says, well, I met this person at the Oregon Ghost Conference and it changed my life. I never anticipated, to that level. And so I'm so thankful. And I think that's what makes it so hard that we've had to miss out the last, 2 years or this last year or more. And we so desperately want to get back to connect with each other because even like me and you, we've talked such a short amount of time. When we first met in Oregon City, it was like, oh my gosh, I've met my best friend. And now, it's like, when was the last time I even talked to her?
I know. And it's like, you're so busy. It's like what I said at the beginning, like, oh, hey, yeah, nice to see you. And then the whole weekend goes by. All right, see you next year. It's like, what? What's that? What's that all about?
Right.
I mean, it's crazy, but it's.
We'll have to figure that out.
Definitely, and maybe potentially plan something on the Queen Mary would maybe be good.
Oh my gosh, that I would love that. I mean,
that might be definitely doable. It would be a big process, but it would definitely be doable. But yeah, there's so many great people up in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, I've forged many friendships up there, and it's really great. So. Really excited for this year. And Jeff Davis asked me to be part of that penning. What is it called? Oh my God. Hello. I'm blanking on exactly what it's
Paranormal.
Penning the Paranormal. Yeah. How fun is that? That's going to be great. Gonna be
awesome. And
yeah.
So, we're offering some free events because, we just wanted this year to be fun. There's some paid events, but the author panel or the author reading is going to be amazing. Lloyd Arbach is going to be a part of it. Ross Allison from Seattle, Jeff Bellinger.
Yes.
You're going to be on it. It's just going to be awesome. And that's on Friday, March 26th, 7:00 over Zoom. We have about 15 classes, throughout the whole time period, the weekend.
That's amazing.
Classes on the weekend, and we have over 20 some different events going on. So they just need to go to OregonGhostConference.com and check out all the events that are happening. Really, we're going to kick off what we're saying as Ghost Week on the 21st, so this Sunday night. And we're going to have a share and scare, which is basically going to be kind of what we did tonight. It's like, okay, we haven't seen these people forever, so we're just going to all gather on Zoom for a free event, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to tell stories, and we're going to update people with different projects that people have been working on, because we haven't been able to see anybody. And so that'll be kind of the kickoff, and then we'll have different events pretty much every night going into the weekend of what was actually going to be the Ghost Conference, the 26th through the 28th. So, there's just a lot of events going on.
So awesome. I'm so excited. So, super, super excited. So how can people reach you? Because you have a couple of Facebook pages. I don't use Twitter. I'm so bad with Twitter. Oh my goodness. But you have Twitter as well. So how can people reach you if they want to get a hold of you?
Well, so OregonGhostConference.com, and then we have Oregon Ghost Conference Facebook, Northwest Ghost Tours, NW Ghost Tours on Facebook. I have NorthwestGhostTours.com. My contact information is pretty easily found on there.
Yeah, it's a great website. I was just on the OregonGhostConference.com website today. So there's a lot of great information on there.
Not a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I can't thank you for taking the time, because I know how busy you are, to come on and chat for this little hour that flies by super fast. But we'll get you back on, because there's so many other, avenues we can go. So we'll get you back on in the future. And I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone, even though it's via Zoom or virtual. Hopefully next year I'll be able to come out to Seaside. But
I hope so, because the other challenge is, we were kind of nearing our 10th anniversary, and we're like, well, when you don't have a year, how do you add that into the number? And we were gearing up for a big 10-year bash. And now we're like, well, do we do that next year? Do we do that? We got to figure it out. That's kind of why I said we're going to call this Ghost Week. Because I'm trying to figure out how to deal with the 10-year anniversary, because I didn't want to have the 10-year anniversary be virtual, and we don't know about next year. So, because we're at our, we're pretty much at our 10-year mark. So we want to have a big celebration for that, and kind of focus on the history of the last 10 years of this event. And that needs to be done when we're all in person. Oh,
absolutely. I totally agree. Oh my goodness. Such great stuff tonight. Great conversation. Thank you again, Rocky, for coming on the show. And like I said, we'll get you back or booked in the near future. And I look forward to seeing you Sunday night and seeing how all the events go for Ghost Week. So it's going to be great. So thank you again for joining me tonight. And let's see, I'm going to pull up my calendar. Of course, yes, next week I have Lisa Theriault. She's a podcaster, Supernatural Pet Sightings podcast. So she actually had me on her show. Really great lady. So we'll be talking a little bit about animal spirits, a little bit about her podcast, and some of her experiences. So that's next week. And again, thank you to tonight's guest. Fabulous discussion. And as always, here at the Afterlife Chronicles, we are bridging the gap between mortality and the afterlife, one experience at a time. Thank you so much.